So hello and welcome to the latest in the Leaders with Ambition podcast series. And today I'm delighted to welcome my guest, Sue Staunton. Sue is the managing partner at James Cooper Creston, and she's also the head of life sciences. Now, we've got a really interesting podcast ahead of us today. We're going to hear Sue's story from her upbringing in Sussex and to achieving a place at Oxford University, which was absolutely tremendous. The realisation when she was at Oxford that actually everyone could be as good as each other. And it took a little while, I think, for Sue to really come to terms with that, because there were so many people there that had already knew each other through their various connections. To joining Grant Thornton in insolvency in what was then a predominantly male-dominated industry, and how Sue really had to work to put boundaries in place in what was a 24/7 working environment, and how she then subsequently moved as a partner to James Cooper Creston and really bought into the vision, and now as managing partner is one of the people that's responsible for driving that vision forward. So lots of exciting conversation to have today, and I'm sure some good anecdotes along the way. So without further ado, Sue, over to you to bring your career to life for us.
Nikki, thank you very much. I think one of the things about achieving success in your career is very much about having a belief in yourself, and that's really important. And I was really fortunate that as a child, that was very much inculcated in me and my brother by our parents, particularly our father, who, we could select what it was we wanted to do and really go for it. I don't think he ever said, no, you shouldn't try and do that. There was never a constraint about it. I think my mother, on the other hand, certainly a few times towards the end of her life, was saying, oh, you'd have been much happier working in Woolworths, which I'm not actually convinced about. But I think, so that came through. So we were at comprehensive school, my brother and myself, and we were very fortunate that the school had relatively recently become a comprehensive, and the teachers were very keen, I think, to prove its worth against what had previously been the case of sort of the old grammar school and the secondary modern school. And so we had some fantastic teachers who inspired us, I think, with a love of the subjects that they taught. And then latterly, when I said, actually, I'd really like to try to go to Oxford University because it's one of the best universities in the world, although they hadn't necessarily had that experience themselves, that they were happy to support and to help me to attain that ambition. And so, I think at that stage, I was fortunate that education was very much seen as an opportunity and a privilege to move beyond the circumstances that you found yourself in. And that is something that I think is really important, that I try and sort of say to young people now, is that, use your opportunities with education, because that's the way you can actually get to where it is that you might want to ultimately be. So I think that's very much the foundation of where I got to. So then went to Oxford, which was amazing. In fact, I went to the interviews at Oxford and just thought it was such an amazing place that I was convinced I wouldn't get in. But I'd had a great couple of days when I came up the interview process, just sort of walking around and feeling part of it. And then, then suddenly I found myself actually part of that environment. And that was a little bit daunting. And you mentioned earlier it was a little bit daunting because there were very few people there at that time from state schools. And a lot of people there who knew each other, who had a lot of money. I remember somebody coming and talking to me and saying, wanting a subscription to something. And I said, well, actually, I can't afford it. I haven't got the money. And she said, oh, I know just what it's like when Daddy forgets to put my allowance in my bank account. It's really not quite like that.
You don't know what it's like, no.
You really don't, But, I mean, quite apart from anything else, Oxford and Cambridge, as we all know, have moved on massively since then. But one of the great things that Oxford did for me, apart from the ability to, from the academic point of view, and meeting some phenomenal brains who just helped you to think in very different ways and opened your mind to different ways of approaching things. One of the great things that it really helped with was actually giving you confidence, that take away the social networks and the money and so on, but actually everybody has an opportunity, and everybody, you have the confidence to speak to anybody, So I sort of look back and I think, gosh, you sometimes see quite a few people that I was at university with, who I knew or touched briefly, as it were, to that, who are in the public eye now, and so on. And you think some of them, in fact, you find yourself thinking, and they were idiots then as well, you know. Anyway,
probably quite a few that are maybe in politics at the moment.
Oh, I could possibly comment as but I think I was very fortunate to have that experience. And then you come to the end of your university life, you think, well, what am I going to do now? And I really, really want to stay on in academia. I love my subject, which was history, so nothing to do with numbers at all. But it was very challenging to be able to do that. And you had to have the finance behind you then to do that. And there was no way that I could achieve that. I'd gone to Oxford on a full grant, for example. So decided I had to get out into the wide world and earn an income. Didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, apart from the fact I never wanted to be in an office.
Yeah. That didn't work out as you thought then?
Yeah, no, not really. Because then I thought, actually, I need some money, and I need to earn money. And I think that was probably linked to my parents, both of whom had, gone straight into the world of work fairly early on. My father support his family. He left school at 16, 17. Yeah, so I thought, what do I do? So I went to the Careers Advice Centre, and they said, oh, there's this firm called Thornton Baker, and they're looking for graduate trainees. And I thought, okay. So I read a little bit about it, not masses. And I thought, well, that gives you an overall business qualification. It was very much before you do MBAs.
Yeah.
You didn't really see those. And it was generally felt that the ACA qualification was one that would fit you for business. And Thornton Baker was widely viewed as one of the top big international practices to actually do your training with. So I wandered down to the Oxford office, had a very nice chat with a nice gentleman, and was offered a job as an audit trainee. And that, a year later, joined them and hated my time as an audit trainee because I just couldn't really get to understand what it was all about. And then I qualified, and then I got given some really interesting jobs and started to be influential with them in terms of how they were structuring the audits and so on. And that became very interesting. But one of the best things really about those early years of my career was the support given to me by my counselling partners. Everybody was described a counselling partner in those days, who was a chap called Edwin Antill, who is a great person. And he ran the corporate finance and insolvency team in Oxford for Thornton Baker, then became Grant Thornton. And he took me into that team fairly shortly after I'd qualified as an accountant and gave me a whole different view of what accountancy could be about. And we looked at businesses, we helped businesses. He had a view of trying to, as a team, we turned around more businesses than we put into insolvency, which was
unusual back then, though, wasn't it?
Very, very unusual.
Yeah.
You came against other insolvency practitioners who would very much go in and see everything through this prism of insolvency. So everything has to be, hilled off, as it were. And he would always look for opportunities. In fact, I remember one case where the bank had asked us to put this company into receivership or administration. And we said, can we have a look at it first to make sure that's what we should do, what's appropriate? And they said, well, if you're quick about it. So we did a review, and we said, really, this business is actually very, very viable. And we had to really, really convince the lender that was the case. And we did, and the business continued, and which was great. They needed some help, but that was fantastic. And so I think that was a really good training ground. We saw so many businesses so very, very quickly that you just were, soaked in business and commercial reality. And that has been very much something that's contributed to where I am today, I think. You sort of see things from a strategic point of view.
And it's interesting because you mentioned that you really didn't enjoy the core accounts piece, the bean counting side, which is essential for you growing a career in audit and getting your qualification, yet you continued to do that. So you obviously had this real inner drive around achieving and being successful. How does that happen for you? What is it that drives you?
I think it's wanting to be the best that I can at whatever I do. And It's also not wanting to feel that I failed at anything. And even if, and that goes back a long way. I mean, I think, you can see instances in your school life, for example, where things happen and you either give up or you want to prove a point almost. So yeah, I mean, I can remember doing geography, and I didn't do it at O level because I couldn't fit it into the schedule. I didn't particularly like geography, and I'd got a really bad mark, I think, previously with it, and I thought, I'm just going to show them. So I think I came top in geography in the year just to prove
it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that drive is very much something that is inbuilt, and it's a sort of a mental attitude, really. And I think it's also seeing other people who, it very much saddened me that I was at school with some very, very clever people who basically not quite dropped out, but didn't achieve their full potential, if you see what I mean, and allowed themselves not to achieve their potential. And I think that's such a shame, because then they became vulnerable because they couldn't be independent. And that to me is really important, that, you know, you make your own way and you stand on your own feet.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned your parents, when you and I have spoken before as well, about, you know, they really did instill this in you and your brother, didn't they, from a young age, of working hard to be successful. And I know, as you mentioned, your father was a very smart man and could have been an academic and gone to university, but had to take that step back at the age of 16 so he could support his family. And so I think also you get that sense of pride of being at university and wanting to make sure that you can continue, and that moves forward into your work-based life as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's interesting you mentioned about audit, and you know, as I said earlier, that I hated my years as trainee, and that was because I couldn't really understand what it was about, and somehow that piece just didn't fall into place.
Right.
It did fall into place, and when I went back into general practice, it was, you know, I could really understand it, and I think, you know, it's a great way of understanding businesses, and certainly the way that it's trained now is a lot better. The education and so on are much better.
Yeah, well, as you say, it's a great place to start learning how a business runs, isn't it? If you can understand the numbers behind it all. And so when you went, you decided that insolvency was going to be your home almost. It felt, I think you mentioned that to me, didn't you? You felt like you could come home in that department and environment.
Well, I think it's because I felt that I could be more myself in that environment. You know, people took you as you were rather than you having to be in a particular mold, as it were. And also people respected you. So it was a very open cultural environment. And so, you know, everybody could have an opinion and everybody could be involved. And yes, it was very open like that. And it did feel like coming home. And I think that was a lot to do with the people within Grant Thornton at the time who right the way across that service line were tremendously welcoming and so on.
And you mentioned that you were one of the first female IPs, which is an amazing accolade. Did you feel like a trailblazer at the time, or were you just doing your job? How did it feel for you?
I think I think a lot of it at the time, you know, you're just doing a job, but it did feel quite weird, I think, in some ways, that you would be the only female involved. You know, so I can remember going to a big dinner in London and insolvency practitioners, and, you know, I was the only female insolvency practitioner in that environment, and everything would be geared around that it was a very male cultural environment. I mean, I said, you know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed a lot of the time I spent within that team, but you did have to be you had to be assertive.
Yeah.
And because the sort of work that you're doing, I mean, you're dealing with people who are business leaders who are in distress, perhaps because their business is failing, and you have to be pretty tough to be able to, or at least exhibit an ability to be tough to deal with that. And one of my best friends that I was talking about with somebody the other day here was actually having to break a fight up between two women who were rolling around.
What happened there?
Well, so this is a very high pressure job. It's a listed group which had got into financial difficulties, but they were behaving as if it hadn't. I mean, the whole business, they were behaving as if it hadn't gone into financial difficulty. And it was quite obscene in some ways. I mean, the main people were drinking champagne and everything like it was going out of fashion, whereas, the workforce were obviously vulnerable. That had nothing to do with the fight. The fight was these two women were fighting over, who were very, very smartly dressed, academically qualified people in the publishing environment. And they decided that they both wanted to have the affections of one of the managing directors in the business, and they literally came to blows and were rolling around on the floor, tearing each other's hair out. And so that's not something that your training with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Wales really fully equips you to deal with.
I love how you just stepped in and sorted it out. That's great.
I just have to sort of pull them apart and suggest they go and cool off somewhere.
You see, this is the beauty of insolvency. You do experience lots of different things all the time, don't you?
You do, yes. And some of them a lot of them are very, very sad. People get themselves into these situations or find themselves in situations through no fault of their own. It could be circumstance around them, and you can yourself end up being quite vulnerable in there. So we had one client, which is a corporate insolvency. And I can remember sort of saying to him one day, I think, what you did was potentially fraudulent because of what he treated assets of the company as his own personal assets, and various other things had gone. And then probably a couple of years later, there was something in the press, and he was in court accused of having finally convicted of killing members of his family. The tagline, the sort of thing underneath, sort of, in his defence, was that he lost the balance of his mind because of the insolvency of the company. And that's just awful. But the thing that really sent a shiver down my spine was that a year or so insolvency that we'd done, I was in branch of the local supermarket, and he was stalking me around the aisles. And you sort of look back and retrospect and think, gosh, that is really quite scary. But they're all experiences that you
learn from.
Well, you have to put to bed, really, because otherwise you just not carry on.
Yeah. What do you do with your teams to protect them then at the moment? Is there, I know that a lot of the time, as you say, you're trying to look at restructuring as well, rather than liquidations and looking at a business. But do you have a way of protecting teams if people are getting personal, or because you're not doing something personal, you're doing a job?
Yeah. So we try and assess the risk we always do assess risks when we send people out to clients.
Right.
And when we take on an engagement, we work out whether it's an engagement that is appropriate for us to do. I think that is definitely the first stage, and the environment that it's in, and resource things appropriately. No job is ever the same, and I think that you have to be very careful to make sure that people don't feel vulnerable. And also, I think it's about creating an open environment so that people can talk about it.
Yeah, which is a positive. And I know that you mentioned as part of your career journey when you were at Grant Thornton, back then, I'm sure that the amount of work that you were putting in was just 24/7. I think you and I have discussed it. And you really had to build in some boundaries for yourself and look at building some of your hobbies at the weekends to make sure you had that space. And that's quite hard for you, because you're such a dedicated hard worker. To think about building in free space was quite challenging, wasn't it?
It is challenging, but I do think it's really, really important that people create space for themselves, because otherwise you can become too obsessive about what it is that you're doing. At the time when I was doing full-time insolvency work, so when I was at Grant Thornton, it was the height of a recession, so we were running job after job after job, people in very distressed circumstances, we were running companies as well. It wasn't like we were just closing, we were actually trading them, and so it's a bit like being a multiple CEOs, really.
Yeah.
So, but quite often when you're trying to sell those businesses, the lawyers and yourselves and the purchasers would be working through the night on the deals, because they had to be done quite quickly. But I began to notice that very often the case that by sort of 2 or 3 in the morning, people would start to fall out, but they'd all keep at it. It was a very macho environment, very sort of like off the back of the 80s and the Red Brace Brigade and all that stuff. And then you'd find that by 6 o'clock the following morning, you were further away from getting a deal finalised than you had been at 6 the night before. And then you'd have to spend time regrouping and everything, just because people were so tired and they misinterpreted the way people were behaving and so on and so forth. So I would sort of try and resist us work. I mean, don't mind working hard, that's not a problem. Don't mind working long hours, but silly stuff shouldn't be the constant feature of the working environment. And yeah, I mean, I do remember very clearly one job, and the partner involved said, "Oh, you know, we'll be working through obviously we'll work through the weekend and right through tonight and everything." And I said, "No, the team aren't doing it." And we did have quite a blazing row about it. But we agree, you know, we both apologized then, and you know, after that. And I remember, I think he gave me a book. He came in on the Monday morning, gave me a book as a present, and I gave him a pot of marmalade, and they've both been totally separately conceived, as it were. But I think it's really important to respect people and to respect people's space.
Yeah.
The other thing for me, I mean, having said about everybody's in a worse position by 6 o'clock the following morning, they've been 6 o'clock the night before, is to recognise that keep bashing your head against the brick wall and keep pushing on and pushing on and pushing on with a piece of work doesn't necessarily achieve the best results.
Yeah.
Often you're better to come at something, you get more from being fresh at something and having an outside view or influence. And that's why I think it's, for me, very important that people do have an outside life.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're very keen on, Jones Cooper Creston, that people have a work-life balance. So they get they're challenged intellectually within the work that they do, that it feeds that part of their need and requirement and so on, as well as being able to do the things that are important to them outside work, because people come much fresher to it, and you also get other influences from outside that. So when I was doing insolvency, I went back to a childhood hobby, which was horse riding, bought a horse and so on. And that was great, because when you're riding a horse, you cannot think about the work, or not to any great extent. You have to concentrate on what you're doing. And so then that meant that I was fresher to work, and that still continues now.
It's so good to have a passion as well, isn't it? Because work is a passion for you, I know that, but it's good to also have that outside passion. And as you say, riding it's good for not only your physical but your mental health as well. So it's both boxes ticked there.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that's really important. As I say, it's something that I try and encourage with people as well.
And I think it's interesting, as you say, about finding a solution. And how many times do you think, let's sleep on it and see what the answer is in the morning? And you come back with a different perspective. And so I do think it's some really good advice from you there, Sue. And I know that at GT you were also really instrumental in building out the tech function, weren't you? How did that come about?
Well, that came about, I'd gone back into general practice because the recession sort of ended. I think it was becoming more difficult within a firm like Grant Thornton to not sit in a box. You know, you had to be pigeonholed, and I found that quite challenging. I didn't want to just do pure insolvency. I like the blend of looking at things from all perspectives. And, you know, it's just a factor of being a bigger, more corporate entity that you have to segment them more that way. And I wanted to go back to the roots and look at businesses right from, you know, as in the normal environment, as it were. So I went back into the audit team and thoroughly enjoyed that, actually, and getting to grips with businesses in a different environment. And then it sort of came up, I started to notice that there was a lot of technology-based businesses around our area. And spoke to one of the partners, and we were sort of saying, actually, you know, we're the only firm, accounting firm, have offices in the great technology arc, which is Oxford, Cambridge, and London. Yeah. And so that makes sense for us to really push on that as a specialism. We've noticed that other big firms, say Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and PwC, were looking very much at creating specialism around technology. So the pair of us started off an initiative out of Oxford linked that, and it was at a time when there was a lot of activity going on in Oxford around technology, spin-out companies, lots of things were sort of all falling into place. It was a really exciting place to be. It was a little bit, if I say it's like the Wild West, it wasn't hostile in that sense, but there was so much happening and it was so new and exciting and everybody was so passionate about it. It was a lovely place to be and forged a lot of relationships that are still really relevant today in the market. So yeah, we started with that and then we're asked to roll it out nationally and then internationally as well. So that was really exciting.
Amazing. And as you say that, you know, the passion that you must have felt of helping to create something like that, and also the variety and the different kind of people that you were meeting.
It was tremendous variety. And then at a national level, you know, I was doing quite a lot of promotion of that. So doing stuff I'd never done before, which was with our PR team, you know, going and having conversations with Fleet Street journalists, pitching stories to them, ending up in the Financial Times, you know, whole articles, not just a small snippet. And that was really exciting. And there's a totally different world to the world that I could ever have imagined that accountancy could have given, and a world away from counting beans, as you said earlier. So I think it's about, you know, seeing opportunities and then you go off down those different paths and get those different experiences.
Yeah, which is good. It's just funny you mentioned the counting beans piece again, because I know that you did work in the Heinz factory.
I did.
University, did yes, literally counting beans. Yeah.
No, I did. I had a short period being sponsored by Heinz. I have to say, and I'm very sorry, HJ Heinz, that was more from my point of view to get money rather than actually a lifelong passion of the baked bean industry.
Love it. And so you then were approached by James Cooper Creston about an opportunity. I know you had a really good network in the area, didn't you, that you built up over years, as we talked about. And they approached you with a partner position. And I think you and I talked about the vision that they had for creating and developing the firm. And it was just something that you couldn't refuse.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I tried hard, actually, almost to refuse it, because I kept thinking, well, why would I want to join a smaller firm when I know that, you know, most of my technology businesses, they are global businesses, so they need that global infrastructure to support them. They need, you know, very high quality technical advice and so on. So what can this smaller firm, Thames Valley firm, offer? And anyway, over time and talking to them, and then I suddenly thought, actually, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it, and I'll never know what I might be missing and what it could be like. And I met some amazing people who were working within the firm, you know. So at that point, the managing partner was Adrian Ran, who sadly passed away a few years ago, but amazing character. Steve Clark, who subsequently became managing partner. Robert Holland, who became managing partner. And they persuaded me that there were some great opportunities within the firm, and you know, they'd come from bigger international practices themselves, and so I thought, okay, so that move can be made, and it can be successful. And then we looked at the wider international piece, which I said was important, and James and Cooper, as it then was a member firm of the network Creston, which is now Creston Global, which we're still members of.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that for me was that if I talk to one of my colleagues in the US, for example, about a client, my client is as important to them as it is to me. You know, the size of client that we all deal with is very similar, and that was very refreshing. And from a technical point of view, got some fantastic tax partners here who really knew their stuff, had come from big international practices. So the vision for the firm at that point was to become specialists in particular areas, such that we would be able to take work that people previously might have thought would have to go to a big four firm. We wouldn't do the whole client's work, for example, but we might do pieces of it, I like to think the interesting bits, and to support clients in that way. And I thought that was a really interesting vision. And I joined the firm at the end of 2004. and I'm still here. It's been a great experience. I've been very, very fortunate in my career in that right the way through. So when I was at Thornton Baker, Grant Thornton, and now James Cooper, Creston, that I've had different opportunities offered to me all the time, new opportunities to do things. And I've never been bored. And that for me is really important. And I think, the opportunities I've had with James Cooper, Creston, enabled me to do all sorts of different things and to help to develop practice and to do what I originally wanted to do when I left university, if I couldn't have an academic career. And that's to help to run a business and to lead a business strategically. And that's what I'm doing with my partners at the moment. So it's worked out.
And that's really exciting as well, isn't it? Because I know that you are passionate about people. You're passionate about giving them opportunities and also seeing people develop careers. And so you're instrumental in doing that. You're growing a firm, you're growing people's careers, and that matters to you, doesn't it?
It really, really matters to me, because I think we have our strapline, if you like, on our website is about maximize your potential. And I think people may think that that's all about client facing because it's on our website, but actually it's much more than that. It's very much about our people and how we can help them to maximize their potential. And it doesn't mean that I think that means everybody should arrive on day one and aim to be a partner and they're the only important people within the practice. That's not at all. Everybody in the practice is as important as anybody else in terms of what they want to achieve. And if we can help them to achieve what they want to do through the firm, then that's brilliant. Whether it's setting them on a pathway to a great career, whether it's helping them to find within the firm the career that they want, it doesn't matter. But it's about, and it's not a straight linear progression. I don't think anybody's career necessarily is. We've got a number of people within the organisation, or have had people within the organisation, who have joined in one role and have then seen something else in what other people within the firm are doing and said, actually, I'd really like to do that. That's really where my passion lies, or I'd like to explore a bit more of that. And so where we can, we arrange secondments between service lines. If we can, we will try and broker secondments to our other Creston firms. So, one great success from his point of view, but not from ours, I think, is lovely chap who worked for us as an auditor, very, very good. We were on the cusp of appointing him as a manager, and he wanted to go out to the US, and he had an opportunity with one of our Creston firms out there to work with life science companies, which is what he'd done a lot with me and my fellow partners here. And unfortunately, he doesn't want to come back. He's forged a great career for himself over there, taking his American qualifications and everything. But I'm so glad that we helped him.
Yeah.
Because, I can phone him up now if we've got a technical issue involving the US thing, and that's very collaborative and so on. But for him, then that's
changed his life. Yeah, which is fantastic, isn't it?
It helped. You can just be the pointer. I think you can help to facilitate to help people to do what they want to do.
And as a female managing partner, how responsible do you feel for ensuring that there is more gender diversity within your firm? Is it something that it happens almost just naturally because of the level when people come in and there is a good balance? And how do you grow people up through that? Is it a sense of responsibility you feel?
That's an interesting question, Nikki. I think if we look at the practice and at the profession now, it's miles more diverse than it was, and in all senses, not just gender. When I started, it was incredibly male dominated. Some of my colleagues now can't believe it when you say, well, we weren't allowed to wear trousers.
Yeah, unbelievable, isn't it?
And you all had to wear suits, and they had to be particular type, and all that sort of thing. And even actually, I'm just remembering, you had to always wear tights or stockings. Wow. You weren't supposed to wear bare legs. I don't know quite what that was all about, but it's very, very, very bizarre. So we're now in an environment where we dress down. you feel dressed in what you feel comfortable wearing. And that's important because it's about respecting people as individuals rather than having people as clones. And that then feeds on into the discussion about diversity, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's very much allowing people to see that you can be all sorts of people, sorts of types of people from different sorts of backgrounds, different genders, whatever, and you can still achieve, and you're still seen very much as the same, equally, I suppose.
Equal, yeah. Yeah, it's about bringing your best self to work, isn't it? And that authenticity, and that's something you guys do really well.
Thank you. Well, I think it's just here allowing people a platform to be heard.
Yeah.
And making sure that activities that we do are seen as inclusive rather than exclusive. And so, we have a whole range of, behind the technical stuff, behind the work that we do for clients, we have a whole range of social activities through our various social committees in the different offices. And although people might think, oh, that's frivolous, it actually really isn't, because it's very much about the type of firm that we are, and that the events that they put on, and we don't dictate that at all, it's run by staff for staff, that those are inclusive. And so we have lots of different things. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And that then feeds back. I mean, looking at the firm itself, we've got more women in the firm than men now. The leadership team, I now can't think of the exact proportions. It's not equal yet in terms of male-female balance, but I think that is a matter of time. Rather, it's people wanting people. It's women wanting that as well, and that's the role that I and my female partners have to play, is to show people that there are different ways. If you want to be a partner, what is it about? What does it mean for you in terms of your lifestyle? I don't want people to say, I don't want that because I don't want the life that they have because it doesn't look appealing or whatever.
Yeah. It's role modeling behavior, as you say, isn't it? Because if you look at something and it's unachievable, why would you ever want to or why would you think you can do that? And why would you want to?
Yes. And I think that is critical, that it's not seen as, that we are, and one of my things at the moment is about demonstrating to people that all of us as partners, we may have the same shared vision for the firm, the same ethical values, and that's really critically important. But as individuals, we're all very different and we come from different backgrounds. So you should be able to see one of us and see yourself.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really good way of modeling the behavior, isn't it? And now taking you to your highlights, I know that one of your personal highlights was a summer event that your company did during COVID, which I thought was so lovely. Maybe you could share that with us today.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm, in terms of personal highlights, I'm really lucky to love what I do. And I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to experience amazing things. But COVID was obviously very hard for everybody, and the whole lockdown period. And anybody running a business, there is that worry that this wonderful team that you've got and that has developed over time. I mean, we've been going for nearly 100 years. Well, we had been going for 100 years. That people are becoming disconnected, and no amount of doing Zoom things and team things and quizzes online, all the rest of it can really make up for that physical proximity and talking to people and interacting with people in that way. And so we thought long and hard about how we were going to get people back together, and looking at what people were saying you could do and you couldn't do. And we did a few things like what we call teams of 6. So as soon as people could get together as a group of 6, we put groups together and we said, what do you want to do? You can go for a meal, you can go on whatever, go for a walk if you feel safer and happier doing that. And so nearly everybody across the firm went out in a group of 6, and those 6 would include a partner and a director, as well as 4 members of staff. Building on that, as soon as we felt that we were able and legally allowed to get together, we set up a summer event, which was actually in September of 2021. And it was a bit hit and miss. Could we do it? Couldn't we do it? Were the rules going to change? Was COVID going to come back? because it was September, we managed to find this little window where it was okay. And we took people so that they felt safe, where it was largely outdoors, to Portsmouth Historic Dockyard. And so they did a treasure hunt around there in teams so they could chat to people and everything. And then we finished it on HMS Warrior, which is this amazing ship down at Portsmouth. And on the deck, we're having champagne and canapes as the sun was setting over the harbour. And it was just absolutely stunning, absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And look, everybody just enjoying seeing each other again was really quite magical. And what also made it magical, I talked about 100 years that we've been in existence. That was the beginning of our 100-year celebration. So, and staff didn't know anything about it. You know, I suspect most people don't sit there looking at, you know, when their company.
Yeah, when you were founded. Yeah.
And so they came up the gangplank, and there was this 100. There were these balloons that said 100 and that sort of thing. So. Yeah,
how magical. That is such an amazing memory, isn't it? After going through a really tough time as well for so many people. Really lovely. And what about your challenges? Oh, sorry, just before we finish on your highlights, I know that one of the big highlights for you is also some of your clients and what they've achieved.
Well, I think
the client involved in the COVID vaccine as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I think we're very fortunate that we have some amazing, our clients are amazing, and that, I've talked a lot about staff today, but I haven't really talked about clients so much. And the clients that we work with are the people that enable us to have great staff that we have. And the majority of them are just so interested. They have such interesting businesses and passion for their own businesses as well. Because we work a lot in technology-based businesses, we're working with people who are going to transform other people's lives. And that's very special. You are absolutely all the brains behind these businesses. And yes, we were involved. We'd worked with the company that was ultimately behind the COVID vaccine. I was actually in the room when the company was set up and all the papers were signed, and this was well pre-COVID. And it was just so exciting to see. You'd have been learning about the technology that they were involved with, generally from a vaccine point of view, and then see in the press that to hear, so we heard things that they were involved in the development of what was, I can't remember how many millions of people have been vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but it was life-changing for people, not just in terms of preventing people from getting the disease, but from enabling people to actually go back to having a normal life, and able to go out about and do like we did, have a party.
Yeah.
Sharing was that. So yes, that was very special. But so many of the clients that we've got work with equally transformative things. So that's
so great. And clients work with a firm because they like the people, they like the service, they like the value system, ethics, as you mentioned there, which is so important. So I think it's great. I know you've got lots of clients that you've worked with for many, many years as well, which again speaks volumes, doesn't it, about your firm. And so challenges then, what would you class as being your major challenges throughout your career?
Oh gosh, I think they change over time, don't they? But
yeah, that's true.
But probably, if you look at an overall theme, it's making sure that you do the right thing. You're trying to get it right, and I think it's very much about balance. You learn that as you go along. So it's balance between different people's interests, and where I'm looking at the practice now, it's considering, well, whatever we do, is that right for us as a business? Is it right for us as a partnership? And you may have people at different extremes of view, and it's helping people to come together. And that's just as much the same with when we're advising clients. We may have a client who thinks they ought to do whatever, and we have to temper that enthusiasm, shall we say, by a dose of reality, and helping them to understand what the ramifications of those decisions might be. So I think the challenges in that sometimes those conversations can be difficult, but also the prize is getting it right so that people are comfortable with where they end up.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that balance is always such a huge challenge, isn't it? For so many things, as you say, for the people that work for you, for your clients, for yourselves, you as well, having that balance with your boundaries in place as well. So big challenges. And words of wisdom, what would you share to Sue at school before she made it to Oxford University? What words of wisdom would you share?
I think it's really important not to be rigidified in your plan about what you want to do and how you want to do it. I think you should be open to diversions along the way. And I often look at it as you're going on a journey, and you may want to get from A to B, and you've got a road map that shows you how to get from A to B. But say there's a roadblock up or a traffic accident or something, and you have to take a diversion for one reason or another, then embrace that diversion, see what you can learn from that, but also the opportunities that might bring. I've been fortunate enough to be given lots of opportunities in my career, and to take them and to see where that has led me. So I've done the technology thing, as I said, the insolvency, moving to James and Cooper. And I think it's being open to what those opportunities could be. So I think that's the most important thing, is don't close yourself off to things, and don't put up barriers yourself. We all do. We also think, well, that's not for me because I'm whatever. I mean, it could be, and I think in the past probably was, you can't do that because you're a woman. I mean, there were a lot of jobs even when I came out of university that women were not readily recruited for. I remember trotting into the RAF recruiting office wanting to become a test pilot and being laughed out of the building, because in those days they would not have women pilots at all in the RAF, not let alone test pilots. Very fortunate I wasn't taken up on that. I think that it might have been a very different life.
It's been a very different life for you. Particularly when you couldn't wear trousers.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, Sue, I have to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I really think your words of wisdom resonate about not being afraid to challenge yourself, and also to think about diversions and embrace opportunities. That's what you have to do in life, and I think you're a really inspirational person to speak to. So thank you so much for your time today.
No problem at all, Nikki. Thank you.